Character Modeling Training Series. My name is Matthew Doyle. We're going to be modeling a 3D character from start to finish. Here you can see the concept art for the character I'm creating in Sketchbook Pro. Something like you might see in an indie game. Now I'm creating the model sheet. The model sheet is important because without it you're not going to have a very easy time creating your concepted character in 3D. It's best to use a model sheet so you can get an idea of what the front and side view of your character looks like. And this way you can be more precise when modeling the character. If you haven't already watched the Maya LT 101 videos, please do so now. Of course, our final goal is to have a fully realized 3D character with texturing and real-time shaders or materials all ready to go for rigging and animation. With the model sheet prepared, we're ready to begin modeling our character. To do that, we'll put the front view model sheet in our front viewport of Maya LT, and the side view model sheet in our side viewport, specifically the right side viewport. You can add a model sheet in several ways. First of all, you can go to the View menu, then Image Plane at the very bottom, and choose Import Image. This will bring up the File Browser. Now the File Browser should automatically go to your Source Images folder inside of your project. We can see here inside of my Source Images folder I have my two model sheet views. I'll go ahead and select the front view. Alright, and now we're going to go ahead and set up the side view before we do any adjustments to the front view. Now I could go back to my 4-up view and select the side view, or I could just use my marking menu. Click on the middle Maya button and then choose Right View. Here in the right view, we'll set up the model sheet using a different method. We're going to click on this little button here below the word Shading, and that will open a file browser just like the other option in the View menu. And this time we'll choose the side view file. Now I happen to know that my side view is reversed. In this case, I need him to be looking to the left instead of to the right. To change that, I'll just click off of the image plane, then click back onto it, and this will give me access to the original image plane node. From here I'm going to change the scale. In this case, the X scale from 1. I'm going to flip it using -1. Now he's facing the left side. I'm also going to go to the image plane shape node, and I'm going to change the alpha gain from 1 to 0.25, making it a little transparent. I'm going to jump back to the front view now and do the same thing here. We'll select the front view. You'll notice if you click on the plane itself, you can't actually select it. You'll have to click on the border. That colored border there selects it. And I'll change the alpha gain here also to 0.25. Next we need to set up our character so that, in this case, he's roughly 5'6" or 5'7". We'll go with 5'6". That's roughly 170 centimeters if you round up. If you're not familiar with Maya working units, by default they're set to centimeters. So I'm going to need to scale up my image planes so the character is 170 centimeters tall. Now you'll notice that he has some bleed area under his feet and above his head. So I'm not going to be able to just set the size of the image plane to 170 centimeters because that would be quite a bit larger than I want him to actually be. What I'm going to have to do is figure out a way to just make the character drawing itself 170 centimeters. And actually there's a handy tool for doing that inside of Maya LT. It's called the Measure tool or Distance tool. And what we'll do is we'll stay here in the front view, and inside of the Create menu you'll find the Measure tools and then Distance tools. We'll select that. Now what I'm going to do is just click on the main grid line here at the origin to set my origin point for the distance. Then I'll just click along the top here somewhere to set up my distance measure. And you can see right now, right there in the middle at this distance, from this point to this point, it's about 19 centimeters. So we've got a long way to go. I'm just going to select the Move tool. Then I'll move this locator at the end here up until I get to 170 centimeters. I'll have to zoom out as I do this obviously so I can see more viewport space. I'm going to turn off the grid now because it's getting kind of distracting so I can see the distance better. Alright, just about there. And there we go. Now that's one way to have done it. Alternatively, I could have gone to the Attribute Editor, selected the Locator node, and right here where it says Translate, you can see that the Y value is what we set it to by interactively dragging it. So I could have just typed 170 here and I get exactly what I want right away. That's going to be the height of our character, about 5'6". And now we just need to scale up our image planes so they match this height. To do that, we'll select both image planes and simply use the scale tool to scale them up and move him into position as well. Remembering to keep the bottom of the feet at the bottom locator, which is on that origin grid line. Almost there. Alternatively, I could have altered the model sheet so that it had no bleed at the top and the bottom. I could have simply cropped it in my image editing program so the feet were exactly at the bottom of the image and the tops of the ears at the top. However, I personally prefer to leave some bleed in my images. Alright, so that looks pretty good. That's about 170 centimeters for the character. Now we can delete the distance tool. Okay, we're almost done setting up the model sheet. There are a few more things we need to deal with. Let's jump back into our 4-up view and frame everything. I'll turn the grid off in all the viewports so it doesn't distract us. Now you'll notice in the perspective view we have the model sheets in a plus formation or a T. We're not actually going to want to see the model sheets in this view, but for now we're going to leave them so we can make a few tweaks. The first thing I want to do is bring the perspective view up and make sure the model sheets are lined up as well as they possibly can be. I don't want to have any alignment problems when I start modeling. So it does look like for the most part the model sheets are pretty well lined up. The collar is where it should be on both model sheets. The eyes pretty much line up. The ears are at the tips in the same spot, top of the head, arms, etc. And all of it looks pretty close. You probably won't get them to match exactly, but you want everything aligned as close as possible. The next thing we want to do is create a box around our model. We're going to be modeling at the origin of our world, so we want our model sheet to create an enclosing box around that point. I'm going to drag the right side until it's just touching the right edge of the front image plane. And then I'll do the same thing with the front model sheet. I'll drag it out toward the left side of the side image plane. Now you can see here that we have these green planes with lines coming out. These are actually the default camera views, the objects for those cameras. So you've got the right side camera, the front side camera, etc. And we can move those further out if we want, but what I'm going to do is turn those off. We'll go to the Show menu to do that, and we'll uncheck Cameras. I'm also going to do that for image planes. And we'll just turn off the grid as well in this case. Nice, clean perspective viewport. We're going to have to do the same thing with cameras in our other viewports here. So we'll turn off camera, and they'll just get in the way. Alright, so let's do a little test here and see if we've got our model sheet set up correctly. The way we'll do this is we're just going to start with a cube here, and I'll turn the grid back on in perspective view actually and zoom in. I'm just going to draw a cube at the center. I'm holding down Shift, which allows me to draw a perfect cube in one action. Then I'll scale it up. You can see that transparency is working on the image planes. You can see that because I set the alpha gain on both images to 0.25 and their positions relative to the cube. You can see through the image planes to that cube. So that allows you to see your model sheet clearly. Likewise, if I go ahead and do some tests with the cube, I'll scale it down so it's thinner on the X and the Y axis. Then I'll move it to the character's right leg in the front view. I'm going to rotate it so that it basically matches the angle of the character's leg in the right side view. All right, everything looks correct. It looks like it's in the right spot in the perspective view as well as the other views, so the image planes are properly set up at this point. One last thing, I'll delete the test object. I want to add my image planes to an actual layer. I'll go to the channel box layer editor and click Create New Layer from Selected Object. Now if I change the visibility of that layer, it hides the image planes. Just a quick way to toggle the image planes on and off in all viewports. I'll give that layer an appropriate name. And I want to set it to reference so that it can't be selected any further. Now they're basically locked. I can no longer select those objects. This way, while I'm modeling, I won't have any problems accidentally selecting the image planes. Alright, I'll reset my perspective view using Alt-Home. We're going to start out with a cube to begin modeling our character's torso. I'll model the torso, and then I'll pull out the arms from there and the legs from there. I'll model the head separately. I'll end up using Quad Draw to help me model the head, because it's pretty complex, and I want to make sure I get the edge flow right for animation and subdivision. Then I'll combine the head with the torso. Now as I model, I'm going to do it in a very crude and simple way. The character will be very boxy looking at first. You want to stay as simple as possible so things don't get too complicated too soon. Don't worry though, towards the end of the character he'll begin to take shape as I add more detail. So I'll go to my Polygons Modeling tab and select the cube. I'll shift drag in the perspective view to drag the cube out. Then in my front view, I'll drag it up so it's roughly even with the bottom of the character's pelvis area. Now I also want to go into the channel box and make sure that the X is zeroed out, as is the Z. The Z being into and out of the camera in the front viewport. You may notice it doesn't perfectly match up with the character. If you really want to, you can unlock the image planes and move them so that they match up a little closer in the front view to the centered cube. But in my case, I'm pretty comfortable with the way it is, so I'm just going to leave it there and I can work within that margin of error. What I'm going to do is called box modeling. I'll be extruding faces out of this cube until I get the basic shape of the torso. Then I'll cut out some more detail and pull out the legs and the arms using the detail that I add. But before I do that, I need to create a center line, a line of symmetry, because my character is, after all, symmetrical. To do that, I'll go to the modeling kit, turn on Quad Draw, and holding down the Control key, I'm going to move my mouse so it's close to the bottom or top edge of the cube. Then I'll use the middle mouse button rather than the left. What the middle mouse button does is centers that new edge that I'm cutting right down the middle of those two edges. Now I'll turn off Quad Draw and go into Edge Selection mode. I can either do that in the Modeling Toolkit by selecting this center icon, or right-click and choose Edge, or use the keyboard shortcut F10. To get out of Quad Draw, I'll just hit the W key on the keyboard. That enters Translate mode. Now I can select that edge freely. In the Modeling Toolkit, I'll click the Symmetry button. Now with the Symmetry enabled, whenever I select something on one side, it selects the same thing on the other. So I could go into vertex mode, grab this vert here, and pull it into place. It'll do the same thing on the other side. This way I'm working on both sides at the same time and both sides will be identical. I'll draw a box around those bottom two verts and pull them into place. Likewise, I'll drag these top verts down a bit so that they're right at the top where the legs meet the hips. I'll go into the right side view and make sure everything matches here as well. Overall, it appears everything's in the right spot. Obviously, there's some detail here that I'm losing, such as the buttocks and belly, but I'll get to that later. For now, this looks to be in the right spot. From here, the front view, I can really extrude upwards easily. What I need to do now is jump back into the perspective view. I'll frame the model. And of course, I'll go into face mode and select the top faces. I really only need to select one side because I have symmetry enabled. Now I'll jump back into the front viewport and use the extrude tool in the modeling kit. That creates the extrusion for me automatically, but not necessarily at the height that I want. So I'll left click and drag to change the distance of the extrusion. In this case, I want to bring it up to where the rib cage is. Now I'll use the scale tool and scale it out a bit in the front viewport so it matches the character's body. I'm paying closer attention to the left side than I am the right. You can see the right side is actually coming out a bit from the model sheet drawing, whereas the left side is pretty much perfect. So that's the side I'll be focusing on. I'll use extrude again, and I'll bring it up to the bottom of the chest this time. Once again, I'll scale it out, paying attention to the left side, and I'll extrude again. This time I need to come down to about right at the bottom of the collar. And this time I'll scale inwards. Let's go ahead and continue with the neck. I'll extrude again. This time I'll go all the way to the top of the neck. What I can do now is use the quad draw tool to create a subdivision at the center of the neck. So again, holding down Control, middle mouse click, right at the center there, I'll let go to create that division. If I go into vertex mode now and just draw a marquee around all those verts, I can scale the entire neck in that area down. You'll notice that when I hit F to frame, it zooms in really close. That's because it's framing just those selected verts. If I want to frame the entire thing, I'll go back to object mode, hit F, and that will reframe the entire character. Now, in order to get some more screen space back, I'll go ahead and close the Modeling Toolkit for now. These bottom bars here, I'm not going to be using any of these bars for this modeling series because these bars all relate to animation or mel scripting. For the most part, I'm not going to be doing much mel scripting in this series and no animation whatsoever. That'll be in the third series. There are several ways you can hide these bars. You could go into the Maya hotbox, and then on the right quadrant you can actually turn on and off these different bars one at a time. You can also do this from the display menu. However, what I've done is created an actual button, and I've tied that button to a hotkey so I can hide all of these at the same time. In this case, my hotkey is Control F5. So you can see there by hitting that, I've toggled them all on and off. In order to do that for yourself, I'll show you real quick. If we go into my Tools tab here, which is my Custom Shelf tab, I'll right-click on this icon here and choose Edit. Inside of the commands for this, you'll see Toggle Time Slider, Toggle Range Slider, and Toggle Command Line. That's all there is to it. If you don't know how to set up a custom shelf or how to create shelf buttons and hotkeys, you'll want to watch the Maya LT 101 video that covers that stuff. So let's go ahead and see how our torso is shaping up in the right side view. For the most part, everything's properly positioned. However, we could do a little work here. Let's broaden the chest area. Make some adjustments also to the neck. I'll go into the vertex mode to do that now. I'll start with the chest, selecting using a drag marquee. Again, I'll use the scale tool and scale straight out so it matches the model sheet. I'll do the same thing with the bottom of the rib cage, the top of the waist. In this case, since there's no symmetry here, I'll move it so the back verts are actually in a little farther. So I'll select those by themselves and pull them in. Now for the neck, you can see his head is slanted a little forward here, so I'll need to make some adjustments as well. I think I need to pull these verts down so it matches. And I'll pull these up. I'll go back to the front view and make sure that all looks right. You can see on the side here I need to bring it in. I'll enable wireframe on shaded in our views so I can more easily see the structure of my mesh even when it isn't selected. I want to bring these verts in a little closer on the neck. a little bit farther inward to round it out a little better there. Okay, let's go ahead and proceed with creating the arms. Now there are several ways I could go about this. I could create the arms as separate objects and then connect them to the torso using the bridge tool. Or I can create the arms by cutting the arm cross-section out of the side of the torso. That's what I'm actually going to do. I'll jump into my right side view and bring the Modeling Toolkit up. What I like to do is start out with an octagonal shape for the arms. It's not a perfect cylinder, but it's close enough for me to get started with. I'll select my mesh and go into Quad Draw. What I'm going to do is create a new edge here at approximately the center of the arm ring on the model sheet. The ring denoting where the arm attaches to the torso. In this case, I won't use the middle mouse button to center it, because that wouldn't place the line where the arm is. Instead, I'll use the left mouse button and center that edge to the arm location. Now remember that creates a new edge ring all the way around the character. In fact, if I jump into the front view, you can see there's a new edge in the front view as well. That edge should be centered at the middle of the arm where it connects to the torso. And that does appear to be the case, so I can continue on. Now I'll create another edge ring, and this time I want to center it going vertically through the arm. I'll exit Quad Draw using W on the keyboard, and select this vert, and drag it so that it's more centered with the cross-section of the arm. Likewise, I'll take this vert here and center it as well. Just continue to make some tweaks here until I get what I want. Okay, good enough. If I jump into my perspective view, we should have the same thing on both sides. Great. Now I can use the multi-cut tool. The multi-cut tool is going to allow me to begin creating the arm's cross-section off of these new edges. Using the multi-cut tool, I'll just click on this edge here where the arm ring or cross-section meets it. Then I'll click on this edge, and that creates the first edge of the cut. I'll just continue around now to finish the circle. And then at the end you can see it tells us it will close the loop when I finalize the cut. I'll hit enter to complete the tool and we have our cut. Once again, going into perspective mode, we should have the same thing on both sides, and we do. So again, symmetry really helps minimize duplication of your work. Always good to have it enabled when you're doing this type of model. As I said, I like to work with octagons for arms, so we need to create one more division at the center point of all these edges. I'll turn on multi-cut again, and rather than just clicking where I think the center is, I can enable snapping by holding down Shift. You can see it tells me snapping is enabled, and if I click on an edge, you can see percentages showing where the snap is in 10% increments along that edge. You can change that snapping amount in the multi-cut settings. Where it says snap step percent 10, we could make that 1%, 24%, or whatever you want. But I think 10% will work for me because what I need is 50. What I'll do is snap to 50% here as well, and hit the End tool. Of course, this means I've created a T-junction here, and as a result I've created a 5-sided polygon. Obviously you want to keep your polygons to all 4-sided or quads. So I'll have to deal with that later, but for now this is going to work just fine for me. I'll snap on this edge at 50%, and this time I'll end my edge on the back edge of the silhouette at 50%. I'll do the same thing in the lower right quadrant. And here in the left quadrant. Now I can slide these verts so they create a more rounded cross-section. Before that, I'll turn off multi-cut, and I'll change my transform constraints in the Modeling Toolkit so that I'm surface sliding. This will constrain these verts as I move them to the surface of the object. So I'll go ahead and position this one here, position this one here, and the same thing for these other two. Okay, great. Now if I jump into my perspective view, you can see that because I had surface sliding enabled, those verts are still perfectly coplanar with the surface. If I haven't done that, When I moved those verts around, they very likely would have been sticking in or out of the mesh rather than being coplanar. So, very good thing to keep in mind when moving verts around on the surface of your object and you want to maintain the shape. Turn on Transform Constraints, Surface Sliding. Okay, now I can turn that off. Great. Now we're ready to begin extruding our octagonal arm. To do that, I'll just select the faces of the cross section, holding down Shift to select them all. What I want to do is once again use the Extrude tool. I'll click on Extrude, go into the front view this time, and I'll move those faces down and rotate them so they are perpendicular to the bottom of my screen. Now I'll move them back toward the torso some. Here's where you can actually see a discrepancy between the side view and the front view. The front view looks like we're not quite where the arms should start at the top or bottom. They need to be moved up some, whereas in the side view they're pretty close to perfect. This is probably because when I created the model sheet, I didn't take care to create the arm cross section at the same spot on the side and the front view. So I'll move this up so it matches. I'll select the verts that connect to the torso, turn on Transform Constraint Surface Slide, and I'll move them up into place. Now I can select these verts, and I'll scale them down a little. I'll turn off my Surface Slide Constraint, and move those up a little. Alright, so let's continue extruding out the cross section. Back into face mode. And use the Extrude tool. Now here, I want to stop it right about where his elbow would be. Now I'll scale him down a little, and I'll extrude again. Here I'll create the huge Popeye-like arms. So you can see that the bottom comes out a little further than the top, so I need to bring it down so it is more centered, and then scale it again. And I'll extrude one more time. We're getting close to the hands here. I'll stop right about where the thumb is, and scale it down just a little. Great. So before I add the hands, let's go back and work on the legs because the hands are a bit more complicated. I'll stick with the simple stuff first. I'll do the legs the same way I did the arms. We need to cut a shape out here so that I can extrude the legs. I'll go into the side view. First things first, I'm going to add some detail here by creating another edge ring so I can pull out the buttocks and get that full leg shape. Back to the Modeling Toolkit, turn on Quad Draw, hold down Control, and middle mouse click. Alright, now I can pull out the verts here. And I'll pull out these to get more of a rounded buttocks. And I can do the same thing for the tummy here in the front. Finally, bring this in. Just continually refining the model silhouette. And I'll go ahead and add some more detail to the chest area as well. You can see that I'm having some issues here being able to cut a new edge ring due to those T-junctions. So I can use multi-cut. I'll click on the outside of the torso in the front, drag straight across, then let go. That will create the edge ring for me. In perspective view, you can see, sure enough, I've got an edge ring all the way around. But I want to align these edges up now. One trick to do that is to use the scale tool and slowly but surely drag down on the y-axis without touching or passing the perpendicular axis on the gizmo. This is going to move all the selected verts so they end up being coplanar with each other. Alright, so this is a good place to stop. We'll see you in the next video.